today we are going to set up a still life. So the first thing you'll need is some sort of fabric in which you can drape over a surface to add dimension and basically just a surface for all of your objects. Now, if you have an area for context, say I was doing a still life with just all of my favorite coffee items, my slow drip, my pour over, my French press, etc. Maybe I'd want to put that in a coffee corner and use burlap, or maybe it's the backsplash of my kitchen, and that is the context for my still life. However, today we're going to be using this black sheet. If you have white, that also will work pretty well. If you have a really cool fabric, that could offer some intrigue, especially if you're going to be adding color to your still life, like painting. Another thing that you could use is maybe you have a favorite jersey or a favorite music t-shirt, etc. But this is going to be my example. Now I'm just going to be building it off of this piece of plywood, and I want to add height to some of my objects. The tallest thing I have is only about 1 foot tall, and so I want to be able to create some height in my still life. So I'm just going to grab a box and place this to the left here. Now, like any composition, you want to think about your rule of thirds. You also want to consider your rule of odd, so an odd number of objects is usually more appealing. I'm going to have a lot, so it's going to kind of hide or disguise that factor. And then also an L shape will also kind of create movement for your eye to travel, and then also offer an area for negative space. So I'm going to shift my box to hopefully one of those third lines when I start taking my images. And as I drape my fabric over it, I want it to go over the box, cover the plywood. Then I also am going to go up the wall a little bit. And I'm just going to clip it to these pieces of metal I have on the wall. Now, if you didn't have an area like this, another great thing you could use is just a chair with a back. So if I didn't have a wall where I could clip this onto, I could literally just put a chair, drape the material up over the back, and place a very small still life on the seat of the chair or in front of it on the ground. And I have infinite amounts of room, and that is offering the box and then also the wall for the fabric to drape up. Let's see here. Now this fabric is basically absorbing a lot of the light, so you won't see too many of these folds, but sometimes in drapery, it's nice to create movement that way as well. All right, so collecting your items, you want to think about interesting forms. So dimensional objects that offer form. So as I add a light source, which is also another key thing to have. All right, I'm going to be using this as my key light. If you have a fancy light like this, you could use that. You could also use just a lamp light or set up your still life next to a window where you can allow natural light to come in as your key light. The angle I'll adjust once I have everything set up, but essentially you want to have a 3/4 angle roughly between the camera or your view to your still life, so it adds highlights, midtones, shadows, and cast shadows to all of your objects. So that being said, the objects we want to pick should have form. That means dimensionality. So I like coffee, so I'm going to be using some coffee paraphernalia. So this is my French press. And I'm going to add this jar. Now, I can also add coffee beans and fill this up. Coffee beans offer a really great prop because I can scatter them over my still life and create kind of a visual trail to pull my view in. But if I want to fill this up, I can act like it's spilling, etc. For now, I'm just going to set up the objects, and then I'll come back to that if I need it. So thinking about the forms, I want the handles facing different ways. Feel like that. So if I want to include the coffee or spill some of these beans, I'll do that later. And then I'm going to build from there. So I'm thinking about the height. This is going to be my vertical, and I'll start to arrange it this way. So I like this. Some other things I like. I really like drawing, and these little mannequins are usually associated with observational drawing. So I'm going to add that, and I'm going to add some other drawing tools, like some of my drawing pencils, and my sketchbook. And maybe I take out some of the pencils and kind of scatter them. What would try to add some depth and overlap. Well, you don't want it to look super unnatural, so that would probably be the way my desk would look. And I'm also going to be using some of the objects I choose as ways to build height as well. So I'm going to use some books that I've been reading, and I'm just going to create a stack of them over here. And basically, I'm going to offset the bindings like so. So all this overlap also creates negative space. I'm going to add my DSLR Canon camera to the top of the stack, and I'm going to place it in a way where I can see the dimensionality of this camera. So I want to see it like a 3/4 view, but also I want to keep everything kind of off kilter from each other. So the way I arrange the strap, I can also create some flow. I kind of want to see the Canon in there, but I want it to overlap some of this, so flowing down over the books. It kind of creates a visual trail. And then my little daughter is starting to get into these big chunky Legos, which I thought are pretty cool shapes. So I'm going to try to stack them in a way that looks like they were, mid-progress being stacked from us, but then also just trying to angle them. This is going to be a charcoal drawing, so I'm not necessarily going to see color, so think about value. So if there is value difference between the colors of blocks, so I just want to make sure there's enough contrast. I'm also going to try to build up the height a little bit in the background. And maybe tip some over. All right. So if I'm looking, there's a lot of negative space in the middle. If you have things like headphones, they offer a great visual trail too. So I could maybe put the earbuds somewhere in the foreground and kind of wrap the wire around things. Maybe it goes up on here. I like to see it, so I'm gonna wrap it up around this coffee cup. Put it over my sketchbook. Game controllers, remotes, they offer really good form too. So maybe I put this over here with my my headphones. And as I'm looking, it has a nice L shape. I have this hand that I might include, just trying to look for a place that looks good. I could put it over here, but it's kind of bringing the attention back up. We'll go with that for now. We'll try it. So now when trying to arrange the lights, I want the light to come in and give highlights to my forms. The light fall off will add some midtones, and then shadows on this side, then also cast shadows. I'm going to turn down the lights to the room so it's about to get a little darker, and take a look at this thing. I'm going to pull my light away because the highlights are a little intense in the camera right now. I can adjust those when I start taking the pictures. Now from this view, I'll probably have to take my images at a slightly higher perspective, because from the camera right now, you can't really see these objects. They're all basically on plane. We're also, to consider that, I'll be pointing down, so it would be nicer if I had something a little bit taller back here. If I had basically a taller pot or a thermos of coffee that was taller than all of those things, I would actually like that right there, and I think that would create a better L shape for me to work with. But we'll start taking a couple pictures and see how they look. One other thing to consider is we're going to be adding that surrealist twist to our composition. So giving myself a negative space to add that idea. So for me, I might just include a picture of me reading a book, and I want to put myself maybe like right here on this edge would be good. So maybe I just move the camera over a little bit, and I could place me there. Now that being said, what's going to be in the background will be this camera, which is pretty dark and there's not a lot of contrast behind it already. So maybe I drop the camera down below and leave myself more room up on the books. Maybe I just add something else in the background in which I could contrast, or maybe I just create a little bit more room for that element to sit in. And I think I'm just going to have maybe a little person dangling their legs off here, reading maybe even one of these books. Let's see what this looks like. All right, so I'm going to do some close-ups. And all the objects don't have to be in the shot either. So I'm going to try that one again. Autofocus to the sketchbook. Try this view. Do it horizontal this time. Now, if there are areas that are really dark, like right in here, I can adjust the direction of my light, add more light to that area. I could just change what's back there. Maybe I put something, again, lighter behind the camera, or maybe I just reframe it so I don't include as much of that. I really like this area, but composition. Just put this guy back here for cool shots. Getting a little dark, so you can see the highlights on the mannequin are overexposed. So I'm darkening to that, but then in my shadow areas are slightly underexposed. I can fix that, fix some of that in post. If I can do it ahead of time, it's always better. All right, so you're gonna be taking at least 20 pictures. Take 20 to 40 pictures at minimum, like I said. And then rearrange. You might have to play with this for quite a while, like up to a half an hour of trying to figure out a good position. Maybe play with the orientation certain things are, if they're this way versus this way. You wanna come up with different angles. You wanna stack things to create depth. If you can have things come out at me in my foreground, I can use that as a visual trail to pull me back into this composition. So repeated objects like these Legos. I also talked about this coffee beans, those would also work. I'm even doing something very similar with these drawing pencils. All right, you can point the viewer in certain ways, but then also the way I frame this could be a leading line towards the background or to that surprise that I'm going to add at a later time. All right, so take, again, tons of pictures. You can always select, edit down and find that best one. Change the positioning of your light and have fun with it.